On ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Courtney Cronin, Matt Jones with you on this January 1, bright and early. Evan, Canty, and Michelle will be back tomorrow to get you ready for the national championship, because by this time on Tuesday, we will know who will advance out of the CFP semifinal games, which we have right here on ESPN Radio later this afternoon. We have so much to get into, Matt. From another wild day in the NFL, Week 17, this is Pete Rozell's dream. You have games that matter down to the very final moments of the 2023 season. And as we turn the page to 2024, I think there are a couple things that we know here. Lamar Jackson, pretty sure he's getting his second MVP award. The Philadelphia Eagles are not a very good football team right now. And on top of that, the showdown that we're going to have for the AFC East for Sunday Night Football in Week 18 between the Bills and the Dolphins might be in that game of the year category.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about. First of all, there's only one team in the NFL that I feel like you can trust at all, and it's probably the Baltimore Ravens, and that's a team that in the last few years you haven't been able to trust in the playoffs at all. So I think that makes it very exciting. It does set up for that Bills-Dolphins game. There's probably 8 games on the last week that are that have like playoff implications, which is obviously great for the TV networks. It is interesting, though. It's like mediocrity defined across the league. You sit there and you go, well, in the NFC, if I have a 6-seed Rams team, I'm sure they may be playing better than anyone else. And in the AFC, you've got the Texans and the Colts. If they get hot in a particular game, would it be crazy for them to beat almost anybody else? I don't think so. So I really like it. I like chaos in sports. We've had chaos in college football. We've had chaos now in the NFL. To me, that's when sports are at its best.
We will have plenty of chaos for you over the next 4 hours here on Unsportsmanlike. You can join in the conversation on the Dr. Pepper call-in line at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. ESPN Nation is presented by Dr. Pepper. It's not college football season without the delicious taste of an ice-cold Dr. Pepper, the one that fans deserve. We have so much college football action to get into, but let's start with these Week 17 games. The big one taking place in Baltimore. The Ravens having no problem handling this Dolphins squad, 56-19. You're hearing that score correct. Lamar Jackson on another MVP-like performance from him yesterday, following up what he did last Monday in San Francisco. This is a team now that has locked up the AFC's number 1 seed, so the road to the Super Bowl through the AFC will end up going through Baltimore. Let's hear from Lamar Jackson following this win on what getting home field advantage means for the Ravens going forward.
Knowing that we still have a lot to get going on, we got to finish this season the right way. We had one obstacle, we finished that obstacle. We got Steelers next week. That's how I'm staying focused this season, just taking it one game at a time like I've been preaching to you guys all season.
All right, so Lamar, 321 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 35 yards on the ground as well. His contributions here over the last couple of weeks to solidify his case as the MVP. Of course, that's what we're talking about this morning, because this game wasn't in question. I have no qualms about this Ravens team, given what they've shown us the last couple of weeks. They go on the road and beat Jacksonville. They go on the road and beat the San Francisco 49ers. And then to go back home and do this against a Miami Dolphins team who, very well may end up seeing them again in the postseason at some point. I don't know if there's many holes that you can poke in what the Ravens have in their resume and what they've done this season, Matt. What I do know is that these final games and the jockeying for positioning in that MVP race has certainly helped Lamar's case and what he's been able to do to build his case against Brock Purdy, fending off Dak Prescott here any late stretch, and we'll get into what happened in that Cowboys game. But it is really impressive to see, because Todd Monken's offense, and you saw him on that TV a lot yesterday, they kept showing him and highlighting all the work that he had done to get this group where it's at right now, where you're getting major contributions from Zay Flowers, from that incredible catch from Odell Beckham yesterday as well. Those are the things that make this Ravens team a formidable opponent in the 2023 NFL playoffs, and that's what makes them a scary threat, because this was not the same offense the last time we saw this team in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, with Lamar, first of all, what a quote machine there. Every complete phrase that means nothing we hear over and over. I love Lamar. When he was at Louisville, he said all kinds of interesting things. The NFL has sucked all that out of him. But what it hasn't sucked out is his creativity and ability to play. And you're exactly right. By changing the offense, where he's now able to throw and have receivers that can get open, guys like Zay Flowers, I think it has helped him reach a different stage of his game. Now, whether or not that's going to translate, I think it will actually in the postseason, but we have to see it. But what I loved yesterday was I felt like that game against the Dolphins was a definite show-me game. The Dolphins have annoyed me, Courtney, probably more than any other team. I love Tyreek Hill. I love the way they play. I love the explosiveness. I love Tua. But I want to like Mike McDaniel, but there's something about a guy who thinks in about a year it's like he decided he was cool in the last year, and yet he hasn't done anything that I have potentially thought was all that impressive. And yesterday he got a smackdown. It was a complete smackdown by Lamar and the Ravens. They were dominated from start to finish, and I think the Dolphins will be a joke in the playoffs. And I kind of think they are where the Ravens were 2 or 3, 4 years ago, where a lot of what worked for them wouldn't translate in the postseason. But I do think, Courtney, this year it does for Baltimore. And if there was ever a year for Lamar to go and win a Super Bowl, I think this is the one, because they have a matchup advantage against the teams that they play for the most part, and the teams that give them trouble, those hard, physical, defensive teams, there aren't not a lot of those at the top of the NFL this year.
They put up 491 yards, 56 points on the Miami Dolphins. So kind of flipping the script for what the Dolphins did earlier this season against the Denver Broncos. A signature win back then. They had the win against Dallas, but you can look at their schedule this year, look at their body of work and say, who have they really beaten? They had the opportunity to go do that on the road yesterday. They didn't come away with a win. They did come away with some really unfortunate injury news. We saw Bradley Chubb go down late in the fourth quarter. This is a 30-point blowout at this point. They were trying to finish out the game. They were trying to just get through and then get back down to South Beach, but he ends up leaving with a non-contact injury. And you got to hear this from Mike McDaniel, clearly remorseful for the decision to play Chubb at that point of the game.
I would like a time machine for sure in that situation after the events occurred, but you don't know that when you go into it, and you do the best you can. I think the players didn't see the result of the game looking the way it did. You know, they were hungry to get right, and it didn't work out for us.
That was head coach Mike McDaniel of the Miami Dolphins. Bradley Chubb, the fear right now, the reports are that it could be a torn ACL. Xavier Howard was also injured in this game. Tua dealing with a banged-up shoulder. He did say afterwards, Matt, that he thinks he'll be good, but injuries are getting this team at a really bad time. We know Jalen Waddle didn't play in this game because he has a high ankle sprain. Their running backs are banged up. And sometimes, I know it sounds simple, sometimes it's a matter of, can you stay healthy enough week 16, 17, 18 to be able to get into the postseason, to be able to lock up that number 1 seed like the Baltimore Ravens have? They're not going to play anybody next week. I heard what Lamar's saying. I get it, but they have their chance to get rest right now. They have their chance to get healthy, so then come the divisional playoffs, when they're playing their first game, they'll be in a far better spot than anybody that's going to be playing week 1 of the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go back to Mike McDaniel. I mean, while he does annoy me, it's not his fault the guy got hurt. That happens. You're not going to know a guy can get hurt. He could have gotten hurt on the first play. It stinks. I know, like he said, he wishes he had a time machine, but that's football, unfortunately. But the injury point is a big one. You know, during Sunday Night Football last night, they showed the list of quarterbacks, and there are only 7 quarterbacks that have played every single game this year that have started. And if you look at those, 6 of them are in the playoffs, and another one, Baker Mayfield, still may get into the playoffs. Being healthy, especially at the quarterback position, is really what it's all about. If you're healthy, you make it. If you're not, you don't. Period. That's the whole game, in my opinion. And we'll see. Right. It's all about, when they get to this point, who is healthy. It does seem like the Ravens are as healthy as anybody. But I will note, though, about this time off. You got to think about how many years in a row we've had wild card teams actually make the Super Bowl. It's a lot. It's like something like 7 of the last 9. Sometimes sitting out. So let's take the Ravens. Mm-hmm. If they take next week off, and then they have a bye, you're basically 3 weeks in between playing. It'll probably be okay for them, but that hasn't always been a recipe for success. So you do have to be careful sitting out if you have a bye because you get a lot of time off between your games.
Yeah, in 2017, I covered the Minnesota Vikings for ESPN.com, and that was the year that they locked up the #1 seed. They ended up having that bye in the wild card round. And we all know what happened in the Minneapolis Miracle game. That came down to a miracle play because the team came out sluggish the first half, and it was a back and forth affair, and you do have to guard against that. I would say this about the Baltimore Ravens and what they've proven to us this year to know that this isn't a fluke. Like the San Francisco 49ers, a team that they beat last week. They've built their resume upon bullying opponents with, via defense, especially when they have to go on the road. Watching what they did to San Francisco last week against that offense, with that many weapons, with that many guys going over 100 yards, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and that not feeling like a close game whatsoever, to me, that's the element that travels. But the bigger picture thing here is that this offense is more than just Lamar Jackson. Sure, there have been moments where he's had to carry them throughout the season, moments where you're not getting a consistent Zay Flowers, who, again, was banged up yesterday in this game. But the contributions that they've found elsewhere, whether it's Gus Edwards, whether it's Justice Hill, being able to compensate for those injuries that they had earlier in the season to Mark Andrews, to J.K. Dobbins, it feels like the timing of those, and yes, you can't control that, but the timing of when those happened allowed this Ravens team to adjust to get to the point now that headed into the postseason, their health and their direction are lined up. And that's something that you can only hope for. A lot of teams are not able to achieve that sort of accomplishment and have that sort of luck. But sometimes if you're just the healthiest team going into that first week of the postseason, and in their case, going into the second week of the postseason, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. All right, plenty more to get into here on Unsportsmanlike. We are off and rolling. Philadelphia Eagles, on the other hand, they are not. Plenty more coming your way here, ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.